Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for weathering the storm. My name is Lena Plath, and I own Frank PR, and we do the public relations here for the Sarasota Film Festival, and we're really excited to be here. I just wanted to thank our sponsors, the Regal Entertainment Group, Wild Lexus, Familio Family Foundation, and a special big thank you, as this is closing night, even though we do have some fun stuff going on tomorrow as well, to the sponsors and to the volunteers here at the Sarasota Film Festival. We could not do it without them, so if we could have a little round of applause for the volunteers. It is my honor to introduce probably and definitely one of the most important film critics of this generation. Peter Rainer has been a critic at many, many places, but you know him most from New York Magazine, Christian Science Monitor, and National Public Radio, NPR. He is been the chairman of the National Film Critics, which is the most important group in America who criticizes film, for 15 years. And he was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize of Criticism in 1998. His three favorite movies, which I just asked him backstage, are The Original Manchurian Candidate, Some Like It Hot, and King's Speech. So you guys can drill him on that later. My very, very dear friend, and again, one of the most important film critics I know, Peter Rainer.
Thank you, everybody. That was my agent, Lena Plath. It's great to be here today. Thanks for coming. And without any further ado, I will bring out onto the stage our guest today, Penolpe Ann Miller. Thank you. So we'll be talking between us for about an hour or so, and then we're going to open it up for questions or so.
Yeah.
And you've been apprised that this group of 30 caravan folks will be up and moving to a film they have to see at 2 o'clock. So we're not going to take it personally.
Yeah, we're going to try.
And don't. Right. It's. I know that in your stage work you probably had to put up with walkouts here and there.
Never.
Never.
Never. Just those wrappers that people like to open, and the coughing. Yeah.
Well, I know that, have you had experiences where people have, which reminds me, I have to turn off my cell phone.
Yes.
And
let
you
that
too,
be,
folks.
Yes.
I heard a story once, I think it was Brian Dennehy was in Death of a Salesman on Broadway, and during a very quiet moment with Biff, somebody's cell phone off, and he went off. Completely lost it.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Have you ever had? I know you were nominated for a Tony for Our Town. Were there any moments?
There were actually several things happened. That was 1989. I was in Our Town. I played Emily. Those of you who are familiar with the play, Emily is a girl who dies during childbirth at a very young age, and at the end, in the third act, when I'm sort of in the graveyard, I'm saying goodbye to my life, because they let me go back into my life when I was a little girl, and at one point, and Spalding Gray was the stage manager in the play, and I remember we were on Broadway, and one of the kids who played my brother, who also died, it's a very tragic play actually, but life-affirming, surprisingly. He was really sick, and he actually threw up during my goodbye speech on stage. And I remember the audience started laughing just as you are. Well, I'm completely crying crying and emoting, and usually I would hear the sniffles and the Kleenex and all of that, and instead I started hearing twittering and laughing, and I'm thinking to myself, why are people laughing? I've died. I'm saying goodbye. I don't understand. And then I look over and I see this backstage hand with a mop, mopping, you know, the throw up from the floor. So that was definitely an unusual moment. And also I'd had a really bad oh, is this not working? No. I checked. Is this better? Oh, did you hear any of that? Oh, see, theater experience.
Is that stage?
That's my stage training. But anyway, so there was at one point too, I had terrible bronchitis, and had these corsets, and I'd have to cough, and I couldn't help myself, and I actually fractured a couple ribs. I've never been in so much pain. I mean, this was tragic for me personally, and of course there was the tragedy of the play, but I remember that was really, really painful because I had to wear a corset, and I was beaten up. So
God, throwing up, broken ribs.
I know. This is stage, you know, life. The show must go on.
Actually, the throwing up part was in the original script of Thornton Wilder, and then
he took it out.
It's the unexpurgated version.
Yeah. Well, actually, Spalding Gray, who was, you know, kind of a wry, cynical guy in real life, and so was Thornton Wilder, really. But he talked about in his one-man show of, you know, he would actually cry during the goodbye speech. So that was really touching.
Yeah. Well, it's a wonderful play. Now, your young daughter is in the audience here, Eloise. So has she ever seen Adventures in Babysitting?
She actually did see Adventures in Babysitting, and I have to say that she was kind of frightened by it. I don't think she liked seeing me picking up jumbo-sized sewer rats and being a runaway and having a homeless guy and a guy flashing a gun in the bus station. The whole thing freaked her out, but maybe she's old enough now, because she's 11 now, and I think she saw it several years ago, but a lot of people, you know, obviously it's a comedy, but she didn't like it so much. I mean, she just didn't like seeing me in peril, and I think that was hard for her to take. But it's funny when you have children and they're watching you, and they know you as their mom, and then they're seeing you as these weird different characters, and I think that whole concept just sort of freaks kids out.
Yeah.
I never really thought about that, but it's got to be awkward.
Now, you came from a sort of showbiz family yourself, right, with your parents?
Yeah, my dad was in a TV series, some of you may know, called Please Don't Eat the Daisies. He played the father on that show, and he was on that show for quite a while, but he originated on, he did a lot of theater, and he did the original touring company of Bus Stop with Elaine Stritch, and he dated Grace Kelly for 2 years, so he's got bragging rights. They went to the academy together in New York, and his roommates were Ben Gazzara and Nick Colasano. So yes, I come from sort of a lineage, and but yeah, my dad wrote the movie A Walk in the Clouds. So he's a writer, filmmaker, actor, and I mean, I would say that definitely was an inspiration for me to act.
And you grew up in Los Angeles?
I did grow up in Los Angeles, yeah. Most people, though, and now he's spoiled it, think I'm from New York or Midwest or Texas or something. I think there was something online, and when, you know how they write things about you, and so I hear you're from Texas, and I went, really? And someone said too, I hear you're really into Taekwondo, and I was like, where is this coming from? So people write all sorts of things that aren't true. But my dad's from Texas, and but I did start theater training in New York, and I moved to New York when I was 18. So a lot of, because I started there, a lot of people think I'm a New York actress, so I didn't correct them ever, because I figure it was better than, I don't know, being an LA actress. It seemed like it sort of carries more prestige.
Right. Now, how did you go to one of the acting schools that?
Yeah, I went to HB Studios, Herbert Berghoff. He was married to Uta Hagen, who is a famous actress as well, and an acting teacher. She was in the original Streetcar. Yeah. Yeah. And they had this, or they still have it, it's this adorable studio in Greenwich Village. And that's where I got my training. I mean, I acted in high school. By the way, Paul Rubens is a friend of mine, and this is his alma mater. This is his high school, and he's from Sarasota, as you guys may know, and I was in Big Top Pee Wee with him, but it was really cute. He called me, and he said, "You're going to be at my high school today," and so I had to do a shout out to Paul, and he was really inspired to make Big Top Pee Wee because of the Ringling Brothers, and we just saw the Flying Melindas last night.
Yeah, there was a party last night. Across the swimming pool, there were these wires that were set up. No one fell.
No one fell, yeah, and it was raining and lightning, so nobody got struck. But that was really cool, and I didn't even realize that was his inspiration, so I thought that was great. But I guess he was voted...
And here I thought it was Fellini.
Exactly. It was Fellini-esque,
yeah, right,
for sure.
Right.
But Paul, I guess, did a lot of theater here, I would imagine, and he was voted maybe most likely to become an actor or something like that, and I got that in high school as well. I was in a lot of theater productions and in school, so. But I didn't start professionally until I moved to New York.
What were your first key experiences in New York as an actress, including just workshops and stuff? I mean, what really was inspiring to you?
I mean, there was something to me about growing up in LA. I always had a dream and a vision. I remember the movie. I used to watch old movies. It's one of the reasons I did the movie The Artist, because I'm a huge old movie buff. And any opportunity, and I did Chaplin as well. But I watched that movie Stage Door, and I kind of thought, wouldn't it be fun to kind of be living in New York and doing theater?
Katharine Hepburn.
Yeah, with Katharine Hepburn and God, who else was in it that
Ginger Rogers.
Ginger Rogers, that's right. Anyway, so I just had a dream that if I wanted to pursue it, that I wanted to start in New York, and I really wanted to do theater, and I wanted to do Broadway, and I mean, my dream came true. It actually happened, and but there was something about being young and living in that environment. You know, the hustle and bustle and people going to see, you know, whether it was off Broadway or Broadway, and there's artists and there's so much culture, and it just was an exciting time in my life to be there, and I just felt to get that experience would be really important for me, and something really exciting and challenging and adventurous, and I think about, you know, the days when I was staying in people's studios and sleeping on the floor, and the craziness that you put up with in New York. You're just like, I couldn't do that now if you paid me, but you know, it definitely paid off. But you know, I was definitely inspired by just a lot of the theater that I saw, and a lot of the great actors that were performing, and
you did Biloxi Blues, I guess, so that was your first big
Yeah, that was a really
show.
big break for me.
Neil Simon.
Neil Simon's Biloxi Blues, which was part of a trilogy, and he did Brighton Beach Memoirs, and then Biloxi Blues, and then Broadway Bound, and it was Matthew Broderick, who at the time had done War Games, and he was becoming a really big movie star, and I remember getting that part. I just couldn't even believe it, because I hadn't done anything, and I remember the director like came up front and started pacing back and forth, and I thought to myself, why is he doing this? Maybe I'm doing okay, you know. But I remember Keira Sedgwick auditioning for it. I mean, we were all like just struggling actors in New York, but that was a huge break for me, because I knew that we were going to go to Broadway. We opened in LA at the Ahmanson, and then played in San Francisco at the Curran, and I was in that show for like a year and 3 months.
Who was the director of that show?
Gene Sachs.
Oh.
He directed most of all of Neil Simon's plays at that time. He was sort of the director, and Manny Eisenberg was the producer.
Right.
But then I was really lucky, because I got to do the movie that Mike Nichols directed with Chris Walken, and Matthew was in it as well. And only one other actor from the original stage production was in the movie, so I got really lucky that
That's
he
unusual.
that he cast me in the movie. I was like, thank God.
And Mike Nichols was the director.
And then Mike Nichols, So it was, I just knew that when I got that play that everything was going to change in my life. I was a hostess at Tavern on the Green, and and learned how to get tips, and that's how I made my money. And I just knew once I got that play that I didn't have to go back to hostess, singer, waitress. I was the worst waitress you could have ever imagined. I mean, I was like the Lucille Ball of waitressing. So it was a lucky thing that I got an acting break.
No, Mega Vegematic, whatever that thing is.
Yeah, Vita Vegemin.
Vita, yeah. Neil Simon is sort of notorious for not letting anybody change a semicolon in his script.
Absolutely right.
Did you find that to be the case?
Yeah, I mean, when you're starting out and you're doing Neil Simon and he's there every day and he's taking notes and he's watching you, and yeah, you couldn't change a comma or a but or an and, or you can't improvise with Neil Simon. And it's funny because so many actors, especially when they're auditioning for movies, I find that they ad lib and they paraphrase or they come up improv or whatever. And I literally, because of that experience, my first serious professional job was doing this Neil Simon play. I'm terrified of changing or adding or anything. And I guess there's a real respect for the written word, because the person that I'm sure there's a lot of writers out there that get so frustrated when actors are changing everything all the time. So I try to be respectful of that, because I know that they put a lot of thought into those commas and those ands and those buts and those dots and so it definitely
unlike screenwriting.
Yeah.
I know writers who worked for Robert Altman and said,
oh my gosh,
why did I even write this script? I mean, it's all changed, often for the better maybe. But
I mean, I think it would scare me, and it would be kind of a fun challenge to sort of do one of those improv movies where they just say, okay, this is the scene, and just, do whatever you want. And I would just be like, really? Nobody has anything they want me to say? I have to come up with it myself, so that's a little daunting.
If Mike Leigh ever wanted you to be, Mike Leigh is a British director. You may have seen some of his films, Secrets and Lies, the Gilbert and Sullivan movie, Topsy Turvy. He's a wonderful director, but he has his cast basically live the roles. They create the script over a period of months, and then he writes it down. But, that would, I think, be a bit much.
I remember when we were rehearsing Our Town, Gregory Mosher was our director, and he had Eric Stoltz and I ad-lib the soda fountain scene, which is a famous scene in the play, and because he wanted us to get to what was really going on underneath what we were saying to each other. And I remember it was an interesting acting exercise, because we had to be modern day people going to a soda shop, having a conversation, and it's when we first realized that we're in love, or that he loves me, or whatever. And so it can be very sort of liberating and cool, but I definitely get a little bit intimidated by it. Although I used to do improv when I was younger.
Sure. So. But when Mike Nichols directed you in the film, how does that work? Because I know he has a reputation for working very well with actors. Is he the kind of director who gives you line readings, or does he allow you to?
No, I didn't find him giving line readings, but he's very specific about what he wants and what he's looking for. And I've always loved directors who really have a strong vision and they're very clear about what they want. Because I feel like, we as actors, we can do it this way or that way. We can be, more aggressive in our delivery, or we can be more subtle. There's a lot of, we have so many choices, and you really want to know, like, okay, is this what you want? Am I on the right track? So I think with Mike, he was just very specific about what he was looking for. And then there's directors like Brian De Palma, who I did Carlito's Way with, who's very technical director, and he sort of maps out the scene technically. He sort of has it. Whereas, like, an Al Pacino, who's kind of a method actor and likes to feel things out, it was an interesting sort of kind of clash in a way, because Al likes to find things kind of organically. He doesn't want to be told, okay, you start here and then you walk over here and then you end up over here, whereas Brian is so visual and he has it so technically organized how the shot's going to be. And I remember sometimes Al would be like, I want to rehearse it first, so he'd want to find it, and Brian's like, rehearse it? Why do we need to rehearse it? So, it's funny how there's certain directors, whereas Mike Nichols loves the rehearsal.
Right.
And he comes from theater, so I think when you come from theater, rehearsal is so important.
Yeah.
But I've kind of gone either way, you know. With film, it's interesting. Sometimes being really, the first time you're doing it on film and really spontaneous, is sometimes you can capture emotions and feelings that you can't get again. So I kind of have mixed feelings about it. Sometimes rehearsals can be really great, and then sometimes you kind of want to keep it fresh.
Yeah.
So.
Did you find in going, because Biloxi Blues, the movie, was one of your first films, probably your first major film, I would say.
Adventures in Babysitting was the first.
Right.
Yeah, but the first big movie.
Right.
Yeah, although that one was.
And did you find that you had to really alter your performing, since it was the same role from stage to film? Was there a lot of difficulty in transitioning from stage to film with the same role?
It's subtler, obviously. I mean, it's funny because the two very important plays that I did in my career were Biloxi Blues, which changed my career, and then Our Town, and we won the Tony that year. And they filmed it for PBS, and it's very unusual that a production gets filmed that you've done. You know, it's like you never see it again. And luckily, we filmed it for the Hallmark, and great performances for PBS. And the great thing about that was that the camera got in really, really close, so you could capture all those subtle nuances that you can't get on stage. And I always kind of understood that. Like, I understood when there's an audience and when I needed to be a little bit more out there and when I could bring it in. And I think I just knew, you know, when to be subtle, and when the camera's right there, you don't need to do too much. But, you know, when you guys are way out there, sometimes you just need to do a little more. So I kind of felt like I had a pretty good sense of that.
Yeah. Nichols is a wonderful actor too, but he hardly ever acts. He was in a film of The Designated Mourner, a Wally Shawn play that was...
oh, recently, right? Was it fairly recently?
About 10 years ago.
Yeah, okay.
It was
and then he did all the comedies with Elaine.
With Elaine May, right. He's a great, great actor. And my niece, who studied acting with him, I said, if you get a chance, ask him sometime why he never really did any acting, since he was so great in this movie. So she did, and his answer was, the reason he wanted to be a director instead of an actor is because he wants to be the daddy.
He wants to control the ship.
Right,
he wants to be the captain.
Right.
It's true, as an actor, we really don't have a lot of control of the finished product. I mean, that's the beauty of theater, is really once you're on stage, you know, it's really up to you. The thing about film is that it's such a technical medium that once you've done like however many takes, you know, you don't know if the camera's going to be, if the shot that they end up with, or the scene, they're going to be using your take or someone else's reaction, or they're going to be in a wide shot, or which take they're going to use. Like, sometimes you feel like, oh, I was so good in that take, I hope they'll use that one. Right. And sometimes it's on the cutting room floor, and it's just so hard, you know, because you really don't know when you finish shooting what it's going to turn out like. And at least with the theater, you do have a little more control when you're on stage, you know. Right. So that's definitely the beauty of being able to do theater. But yeah, I could see how
he would say that.
Yeah, I could see why he would say that. Although I kind of don't want to be in control. I don't want it all to fall on my shoulders, because the thing about being a director is that you're in charge of everything and everybody's asking you questions, and I have a hard time making decisions. So someone's at, I don't know, really? Do you think maybe should I do that or that? Right. So I think you have to have a certain kind of personality to be able to. I
think so. The director once told me, when things get really bad on a set and they're running behind schedule, you fire the cinematographer. That gains you about a week. You know.
Yeah.
So is Christopher Walken as weird in person as he is? I mean, he's a wonderful actor. He was in Biloxi Blues. So is Christopher Walken like Christopher Walken?
Christopher Walken is like Christopher Walken.
That's great. That's great.
I mean, there's certain actors that what you see is what you get, and what he does is kind of the same all the time, but it somehow weirdly works, you know?
Yeah.
I guess he's doing a movie right now with Al Pacino that I saw.
That could be interesting.
That could be interesting, yeah.
But he's a marvelous dancer, Christopher Walken. And
Yeah, I've seen him on Saturday Night Live.
Well, that, yeah.
Yeah.
But if you've ever seen, I don't know, Pennies from Heaven, the Steve Martin movie with Bernadette Peters, an amazing musical from the early 80s, didn't get a lot of attention. But he has a dance sequence in that that's absolutely extraordinary. And he started out, I think, doing dance.
Yeah. It's you know, when I think about the artist, and I looked back on, you know, movies like Singing in the Rain with Gene Kelly and you know, Fred Astaire, and then it was so great to see a movie like The Artist and see Jean Dujardin dancing like that, because, you know, that medium's really gone, and it was so refreshing because I loved those movies. I loved watching those movies. And there was always the happy ending where they have the beautiful dance and everybody's happy and we all leave the theater happy, and it's just so rare. But both Jean Dujardin and Berenice, who played the ingenue, neither one of them were dancers, and they studied for about 5 months before they you know, performed the dance sequences in the movie. And I was really impressed with that, because that's not easy to pull off, especially tap dancing. That's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, no, it was remarkable. I guess not everybody. You have to be something of an athlete to be an actor in general, though, don't you? I mean, you have to be able to express yourself physically in ways that speak. You can't just sort of act from the neck up, right?
Yeah.
Did you ever do any dance training or anything?
I did. Yeah, I love to dance, and I've always been, you know, I always thought if I could make money doing it, you know, maybe I would have pursued that. But I think it's hard to make money as a dancer. So, you know, I got to dance in Carlito's Way, and you know, there's a little dance in Biloxi Blues, and but I played a dancer in Carlito's Way. But I definitely think that helped me to have that dance training. But you know, I think being physically fit and being able to carry yourself and be poised, and certainly a lot of it is when you're out there promoting a film. You know, it's all about these days it's all about what you're wearing and how you look, and so I think dancing, you know, can help with being graceful and being able to walk out on stage and hold yourself upright. And
there's also something, for some reason I never heard this phrase until recently, a step and repeat. That's what you do, right, when you're doing sort of photo ops and premieres and stuff. I guess you're supposed to step and hold a pose, and it's kind of like kabuki almost, right?
Yeah, well, there's an art to it, I have to say, posing and all that. I mean, you know, it's hard nowadays as an actor. It's almost like you need model training, you know, when you go to these events, because there's all these red carpets and these photographers, and you know, you're posing and you want to look natural. You don't want to look too posed, but you want to look good, and it's kind of intense. You know, I think of Meryl Streep. It's so funny because when she won the Academy Award, and our movie, The Artist, won the Academy Award, we went backstage, and I said, because my daughter is a big fan of hers, which I thought of all the people that my 11-year-old wanted to meet was Viola Davis and Meryl Streep, and I thought, these are women, you know, they're older. So to me, I was really impressed. It wasn't Emma Stone, it wasn't, you know, these younger actresses, it wasn't Selena Gomez. I mean, she wanted to meet those incredible actresses, and so that gives me hope. But I went backstage and I said, oh, I really want to get a picture, because Meryl Streep met Eloisa and was just lovely. She's a lovely woman anyway, but she's very down to earth, and I don't know if you've interviewed her, but it's so funny. And here she's been acting, you know, all her career. I mean, she's been in amazing movies, and you'd think she'd really understand the camera, and she kept, I took these pictures on my phone, she kept holding her Academy Award, and it kept blocking my face, and she was like this with backstage, and I thought, oh my God, Meryl Streep, don't you know where the camera is and what you're supposed to be doing here? And I was so funny, but she was just like, you know, it almost seemed like she was drunk, you know, she was just like, and she did it twice. And I said, okay, I give up. So now I have these pictures of me with, well, the Academy Award in front of my face, and Meryl Streep, like, but.
Well, maybe she was playing an actress who doesn't know where the.
Or maybe it was about like an All About Eve moment where she didn't want my face to be seen. Or maybe like it means next year I'll be getting the Academy Award.
Well.
Anyway, it was funny.
One of the films you did a number of years after Biloxi Blues is a favorite comedy of mine, The Freshman, with Marlon Brando and Matthew Broderick. It was directed and written by a wonderful writer-director, Andrew Bergman. So that must have been interesting.
That was really interesting. I mean, I'll tell you, the beginning of my career was really pretty amazing if you think about it, because I went from like, I mean, you know, working with Mike Nichols, then then there was Marlon Brando and Robert De Niro and Al Pacino and Gregory Peck, and I mean, it's like I was working with these living. Did you lose me? Hello? I heard we lost me. Can you hear me? Oh, something happened. Oh, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. All right. So.
If the acoustics were good enough for Pee Wee Herman in this room, this. Okay.
Yeah. You know, I mean, especially my generation, the thought of being able to work with Marlon Brando, who, if you're an actor, you know, he's as good as it gets. And of course, On the Waterfront, Streetcar Named Desire, I mean, these were all movies that, you know, were way before my time, but if you're a film lover, those are the movies you fall in love with. And so I remember, though, I got an offer to do this other movie. Do you remember that movie, Johnny Handsome?
Yeah.
I was offered to do that movie, and with Mickey Rourke, wasn't it?
Right.
And they were really pressuring me to do it, and I said, well, I got this offer to do this movie with Marlon Brando, and they kept trying to tell me, well, you know, Marlon Brando is not going to show up for this movie. He's such an eccentric that he's not going to show up. So
particularly playing a variation on The Godfather.
Yeah, he was kind of doing a parody of himself from The Godfather, if you haven't seen the movie, but it's pretty funny. And I remember, because I'd worked with Matthew Broderick a couple of times, I called Matthew and I said, do you really think that Marlon Brando's going to show up? Because I could do this other movie, but I mean, I want to work, but I don't want to miss the opportunity of working with Marlon Brando. And he said that he had pictures of Andrew Bergman, the director, and the other producer, Mike LaBelle, in Tahiti with Marlon, with their arms around him, you know, proving to everyone, we've sealed the deal, we got Marlon, he's on board. And I think, you know, that was the fear, was that, you know, he may not show up. And I remember we were all in Toronto, where we filmed most of the movie, and Bruno Kirby, who I adore, who passed away, sadly, he sat in the lobby like one of those detectives, you know, with the day that Marlon was supposed to arrive, and he had like a newspaper and a hat, you know, just to see him coming through the lobby doors to report to us. I saw Marlon, we've had a Marlon sighting, he's shown up. But he literally was like in disguise with a newspaper waiting for Marlon Brando to walk through the door. And then the day we were supposed to do rehearsals, and we actually did rehearsals on that movie, we were in Andrew's condo that he'd rented, and Marlon was like an hour and a half late, and there was this thing like, oh my gosh, is he going to show up? And we were all just getting, as the minutes progressed, we were all just had so much nerves and anxiety and anticipation, because we really didn't know what he would be like, because he sort of has this reputation and he's really eccentric. And he came in this powder blue velour jumpsuit. I couldn't even believe, he looked like a big turtle, you know, without the shell. and he's not that tall. And he came in and he's like, oh, I can't even do his imitation. Matthew does a great imitation, but he's like, I'm so sorry, I'm late, you know, and his whole thing. And he said, he was messed up on his time and everything, and he gave us like a big, you know, bear hug. And I think he refractured the 2 ribs that I'd fractured during Irontown. I kid you not. Like, I was in so much pain after he hugged me. My daughter, you know, because I played his daughter. But I was so thrilled because I got to play an Italian mafia princess. And you look at me right now, and I'm such a wasp. And I just had done Our Town, where I was the ultimate wasp from New Hampshire. And the producer and the director had all seen me in the show on Broadway, and I thought, how are they going to cast me as Tina Sabatini, Marlon Brando's daughter? And I thought, but I got to go in the next day to read with Matthew for a chemistry read. And luckily, Matthew and I had worked together before. But I remember, you know, thinking, well, I got to do something to show them that I can play this part. So luckily in the play, I wore a wig. And I dyed my hair. I put a rinse in my hair and made it really dark. And I put on a leather skirt and this sort of, midriff kind of, or not a midriff, but kind of off the shoulder top. And I came in, talking like this, with the Queen, like I was, someone from, the Bronx or the Queens or whatever. So I started talking like that, and they couldn't believe it. And then luckily, it was a comedy, whereas Our Town is such a drama, and the chemistry between Matthew and I. So I was so grateful that I got to play the part because, people stereotype you and they pigeonhole you and they say, and when you're a newcomer, luckily they don't know you well enough to say, well, she can't play that. She's too waspy and she's too white and whatever. And so, I was so thrilled that I got to play such a character-y role. It was such a juicy, fun part to play.
And Marlon was okay as your father. I mean, I heard he does a lot of mooning on the set and all sorts of practical jokes.
He didn't moon me, thank God. But he did do the silliest. He wore these Herman Munster shoes. They were like these platform shoes. It was hysterical because he wanted to be taller. And but he would play the most inane games, like where you take a quarter and you have to like throw it to where it gets half off the table. And so he would play these games where when you take a dollar bill and you drop it and you have to catch it between your index finger and your thumb. And we play the silliest games, but I'll never, he really loved actors, and I remember one time having dinner at a restaurant with Matthew and Bruno, and we were like sort of the Three Musketeers. We always did everything together, the three of us. And I remember one night we were having dinner, and we kept feeling these pellets like hitting our heads at the dinner table. And we were like, what the hell's going on here? And we looked over, and there's Marlon Brando throwing balls of bread, like taking the bread from the basket and literally balling it up and throwing it at us. And he was having dinner with the Grips. I mean, he would hang out with the electricians and the Grips, and then also he had this trailer, and he was trying to be on a diet because he wanted to lose some weight. So he was on a fruit diet. So he'd say, come into my trailer and have some fruit. I have so much fruit, I don't know what to do with it. And so we would also, really? You could come into your trailer? And so we would come into his trailer, and he would tell us, he was like, you always got to trust your instincts as an actor. I mean, he was adorable, really. I found him so funny and delightful. And he said, I was doing this movie, and he would act like, we had no idea what he was talking about. He goes, I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called On the Waterfront. We were like, yes, we've heard of it. We've heard of it. I was doing this scene. I don't know if you would remember it. It was a scene in a taxi cab. And there's this part where my brother is supposed to tell me that he's taking my life. He has to kill me. And I remember Elia, how is this happening? I can hear myself reverberating through the theater. And he said, I remember Elia Kazan, who directed On the Waterfront, wanted me to freak out and be really afraid of my brother and thinking, oh my God, he's going to kill me and this is horrible. And he said to Elia, I don't think I'd be scared of my brother. I think this is really sad. This would be really pathetic that he would be in this position. And so this was apparently like near the end of the day, and apparently he had to be done at a certain time because he had to go see his therapist. So he only had a chance to do like 2 takes or something. And so Ilya said, okay, I'll make a deal with you. We'll do one of the takes my way, and the other take we'll do it your way. And he goes, and guess which way ended up in the movie? His way. And it's true. It's one of the most famous scenes in the movie where he's like, Charlie.
That's where he says, I could have been a contender.
I could have been somebody. I could have been a contender. And when you see him play this scene and you think back, you think, he does it. He does it with such sadness and pity for this guy and such. And it was sort of this pathetic, like, how could you be doing this? How sad that you're in this position. And so he was giving us some really great acting advice, is that if you really feel strongly about an instinct, because you're playing that character, you have to kind of fight for it a little bit or go for it a little bit. So
now I was told, I've heard this from a lot of people, that Brando never saw virtually any of his movies.
He saw the first one, though.
Yeah. Now, how do you feel about that? Do you, I mean, because to me it's incomprehensible that if I were an actor, I would not see all these movies that I'm in, you know, particularly the good ones.
Yeah. I know, I find that really bizarre that you wouldn't be curious at least to see it once, you know.
Marlon Brando never saw On the Waterfront. It boggles the mind.
I didn't know that.
And Last Tango in Paris, yeah.
Well, I could see Last Tango in Paris because that was maybe he had a bizarre experience on that. But you know what he did? He'd have an earpiece, whereas in Last Tango in Paris, he has this famous scene where he's laying down, and you see him looking around. You know, it's a famous scene with the actress that he was in, and it's because he had his lines written on the ceiling, on the side there, you know, over there, and you'd think like, oh, he's so brilliant because he's wandering with his eyes, and he's just finding his lines at all different areas in the room. And in our movie, technology had been advanced, so he had an earpiece. And he had his assistant in his trailer feeding him his lines. So sometimes, because they were in contact with each other and he was mic'd, he'd be having these conversations by himself, and you didn't know if he was talking to you or not. And he'd be like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, "I didn't say anything. What?" And he's like, "Oh no, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to Julie." You know. And I was like, "Okay," but his at least, you know, it could have been laziness. Yeah. But he liked to believe that it was because he wanted everything to be spontaneous and fresh, or he just didn't want to learn his lines. Right. So either way, it worked somehow. Yeah. He was one of the few that actually could get away with it. Right. So, but I'm sure when he did Streetcar and, you know, on Broadway, he had to learn his lines. Yeah. 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 But you talk about a physical presence. I mean, you look at his earlier work, like On the Waterfront and Streetcar. I mean, that guy was, he was all buffed out, and at the time that wasn't even like the popular way to look. It was sort of like, you know, he kind of started that trend of being kind of all. The first movie he ever made was called The Men, where he plays a soldier who's a paraplegic. Oh yeah, I remember that. He spends the entire movie in a wheelchair, and it's one of the most physical performances ever given. As penned in as he is. Then you work shortly afterwards with a Brando protege, I don't know if you call him, but the De Niro, and also Robert. All the Godfathers I've worked with. Right. All the actors that end in O. Pacino, De Niro. I even worked with DeVito and Danny Aiello. The only one left so far that I can think of is DiCaprio, so I'm working on that. And Han Solo. Han Solo you haven't worked with. Okay, him too. So yeah, Awakenings had De Niro and Robin Williams. Yeah, it was funny because I actually was doing The Freshman when I went to New York to audition for Penny Marshall, who directed Awakenings, and De Niro. And I had auditioned on a movie called, what was it called? It was the one that he did with, Demi Moore got the role that I auditioned for, something Angels? It was with who was our co-star? It was Sean. Was it Sean Penn and Robert De Niro? We're No Angels. Thank you. Oh, right. Remember that movie? Yeah, Neil Jordan. Neil Jordan. Yeah. So I remember I went in. It was like maybe a year before, and I had gone in to audition for Robert De Niro, and he had the pages, like Peter does, and he was looking down. And when I went, cheat sheets. And so when he was looking down, I was reading, and, it was about sort of a chemistry read, as you do with other actors. And he didn't look up once at me. Like, he didn't acknowledge me at all. And I remember I was just so devastated. I mean, first of all, I was so nervous anyway because it was Robert De Niro. And then I think, oh my God, he hates me. This is horrible. And I walked out of and I thought maybe this was a sign that he would give to the director, like, if I don't like the actress, I'm not going to look at her. And so I walked out of that audition. I got so emotional. I was crying, and I was like, oh my God, this was just devastating. And so later when I was doing The Freshman, Bruno Kirby, who played Robert De Niro's sidekick in The Godfather, was still really good friends with De Niro. And so I'd heard they wanted me to go in and read for this part in Awakenings. And I was like, I am not going to read for Robert De Niro again. He hates me. And he never looked at me once. And I was telling this to Bruno Kirby. And he said, no. You don't understand, Penolpe. Robert De Niro is painfully shy. He's so shy that he won't look at you because he's so shy. And he said, when you go in, you tell him you're my friend. Obviously, I'm working with Marlon Brando, who, he played as luckily I had a lot on my side at that point, so I could break the ice. So I remember I thought, oh, he's shy. That's so sweet. And and so then, of course, I felt sorry for him. So I came in with a completely different attitude when I came in to read the second time with Robert De Niro. And I said, hi, Bruno says hi, and I'm working with Marlon, and, and I just sort of broke the ice and was sort of joking around. He was like, oh, really? You've met De Niro. He sort of stutters, and it's really bizarre because you think of the character he plays, and he always plays these sort of, bad guys and these tough guys, and in reality, he has a really hard time socially, and so he got, as a result of me sort of overcompensating, and of course, as you can see, I talk a lot. So luckily for this kind of venue, it works. But, for him, he was probably like, whew, thank God I don't have to do anything. And so he actually kind of opened up and warmed up, and he became kind of fun with me, and then I got the part. So
that probably explains why his line reading in Taxi Driver was so good, where he says, "You talking to me?
You talking to me? You talking to me?" Yeah. He probably doesn't know most people are talking to him.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's true. I think he's good in situations where he's talking to fellow actors.
Yeah. On a one-on-one
thing.
But people he knows, obviously.
Right. He needs to trust.
But he's definitely, it's funny because you'd think, the De Niro and Pacino and Brand, and they're all very different. Pacino, sometimes seems like he's a little bit awkward in public settings, but he's much more gregarious and out there and talkative and, much more. I think Robert De Niro is the shyest of the three.
For real. Yeah.
Of the three Godfathers.
An interesting thing for me about Pacino as an actor is that he started out with, the Godfather movies and also films like Bobby Deerfield, very indrawn, very
introverted kind of.
Right, and other actors were all out there, and then, but then he did Dog Day Afternoon and all these other films, and now he's known as, like
this big actor. Well, Scent of a Woman too, which is what he won. Scent of a Woman, where he got the Academy Award, and a lot of people don't think that was his best performance.
Yeah.
You look at even Serpico or Dog Day Afternoon, which of course he was sort of this outlandish character. But you when you do see the Godfather movie, in fact, I had heard the story that initially the studio didn't want Al Pacino, and Diane Keaton, who I guess he was dating at the time, really was pushing for him, and Coppola liked him, but up to a certain point, they kept getting the dailies, which are the scenes back at the studio, to see what they've shot, in the days prior, and they said, he's not doing anything. He's really boring. Like, we can't, we really don't see what's going on here. And do you remember who they wanted? They wanted somebody else to play the Al Pacino role. I know that this is another famous actor. Huh? Sean Penn, no, he was too young.
No, he was in Carlito's Way, but...
No, I'm talking about in the Godfather movie.
Oh, for the Godfather.
Sean Penn auditioned for Michael Corleone's role. Really? Yeah.
Wow.
Wow, I did not hear that, because he would have been really young.
Really young.
Yeah. In any case, at that point, Coppola said, just wait, and there's a famous scene, the scene where Al for the first time shoots the guy in the restaurant, and Coppola hid the gun in the bathroom, but he didn't tell Al where it was, and apparently you see him panicking, looking for it because he can't find it because he hid it behind that sort of toilet thing, and you can see this panic, rushing, and he's sweating, and I think that was the moment when they got those dailies or rushes back or whatever you want to call them, that they said, okay, I see what's going on here. Because he was so subtle, especially in the beginning of that movie, and then he just completely starts to turn, and it's so riveting. And I really loved his acting, too, when it was internalized, you know.
Yeah.
I even think, in Carlito's Way, which is the movie he did after Son of a Woman, I feel like it was an underrated performance because he was subtler in that movie.
Yeah, it's a remarkable performance. I mean, that scene
And Sean Penn was also
in the pool hall, I guess, where he realizes that he's going to be picked off.
Yeah.
And just the way, and of course, De Palma, I think he's a remarkable director.
Yeah, so do I.
Did you, because I mean, you didn't come out of a strict method. Herbert Berghoff is not strictly method, no, but Al certainly is, right?
Yeah.
So in your scenes together, I'm sure you had experiences working with method actors
Yeah.
before. Was that something that you had to kind of...
I found Sean Penn to be the most, of the actors I've worked with, the most method. I mean, if you see him in Carlito's Way, I had a very good friend of the family's that saw the whole movie, and he goes, "Where was Sean Penn in this movie?"
Yeah, a lot of people don't know he's in it because he's so chameleon-like.
He was like doing an Al Dershowitz kind of
Well, he had that wig,
He
too.
had that wig. Well, he permed his hair
that what it was?
and
Oh.
made his hair receding. Like, he literally, like, shaved I mean, he didn't... No vanity with that guy. And with the glasses and the permed hair and, oh my gosh, and the coke addict. I mean, he was pretty... I thought he was pretty remarkable in that movie.
He was great in that
I
film.
thought he was great.
He really was.
But you know, and then De Palma was so great too. Apparently it was the longest steady cam shot ever done at the time. There might be now one that's topped it.
Right.
But it was all the chase through Grand Central Station, and you can see there's not one cut, and it goes on for like maybe 5 minutes or something.
Yeah, he topped that when he did Bonfire of the Vanities.
Oh.
I think it's later. But,
Oh, okay, well.
Yeah.
But I know Steadicam operators have literally, you know, model a lot of their work.
It's an extraordinary scene.
And that all has to be choreographed. I mean, and we were shooting in Grand Central Station, and we were shooting at like 3 or 4 in the morning because we had to shoot when nobody was around. So that was like the beginning. When I first came to do that movie, we shot all the Grand Central stuff first. So the scene where he gets shot and he's dying and I'm crying, I had to do all that in the beginning, which in the one hand was kind of a good thing because it kind of broke the ice pretty quickly, you know, and I got to get the really emotional scene out of the way, and they were very pleased with it. But I actually fought for a take in that movie because they only had a shot of Al lying and then my face. And I said, well, you never see us together in the shot. Like, you couldn't see our faces in the same shot because the way he was shooting an angle down and then one up. And so I said, can't we do a 2-shot, Brian, please? And here's Brian, who's like, everything is mapped out. Like, you know, like, it's like Neil Simon with the ands and the buts. Like, you don't question. And he finally, like, I couldn't even believe, here I am, this, you know, young actress asking Brian De Palma to do a shot for me. And I said, can you please do a shot? And you can see my teardrops falling on Al. And it's a really, you know, touching scene. Yeah. But there was this one scene that he did where Al's knocking on the door, and I open it up, and there's this lock, you know, those sort of locks that were chain linked that kind of hooked the door, you know, to the wall. And he, you know, in the scene, I'm supposed to open the door and talking to Al, and literally the shot was like our face, like you couldn't even see our hairline. We were like here to here, and you can imagine how scary that is for an actor to be on a huge screen with like only this much of your face. And I remember Al was like, and he wasn't doing any coverage, which means he wasn't going to do a wide shot, a 2-shot, a medium shot. It was literally that was all he wanted to shoot. And both Al and I were like, how is this going to work? And Brian's like, that's how I want to shoot it. And he was very adamant about that one. But that's a really cool shot.
Great.
Yeah. And it really worked because there was such a intense moment, and then he breaks the door down and he comes in.
Yeah.
So.
Talk a little bit about Gregory Peck. You play his stepdaughter, I believe, in Other People's Money.
Yeah.
And that's a very tough role. I mean, it was.
Yeah, you know, I was really scared to do that movie. Norman Jewison directed it, and of course, I've been a huge fan of Norman Jewison and his movies. And I remember all these actresses were auditioning and wanting it, like Susan Sarandon and Deborah Winger and I think Melanie Griffith, and you know, they were all big actresses at the time. And Gina Davis, and I was the youngest of all of them. And I remember thinking, like, am I going to be able to pull this off? Because I'm playing this tough powerhouse lawyer. And I remember being very insecure about it because I beat out all these actresses. And at the time, I was kind of, this up-and-coming actress. And obviously, I was working with amazing actors. And sometimes it's a little scary when you're kind of on this rise and you're just going, and you keep getting all these jobs. And then you're like, oh my God, I hope I can live up to this. And so it was definitely that movie, I'd say, at the beginning of my career was probably the most intimidating for me as an actress. Because I think if I played it now, I feel like, there were certain things that I would have done differently. I just feel like I was a little more self-conscious in that movie than I've ever been. And I know that's like the worst thing you want to be, is self-conscious in a role. But then ironically, Al Pacino told me he saw that part, and that's when he knew that he wanted me to be in Carlito's Way. So obviously I was doing something right. But when I initially auditioned for Carlito's Way, I just auditioned for Brian De Palma and the producer, and they said, she's a really good actress, but we don't see her in this role at all. So actually, I wasn't going to get another opportunity to read with Al. And Al had heard or seen my name on a list and said, no, I want to read with her. And luckily, they called me back because initially they said it's not going to go any further. And because I got to read with Al. And that to me was a huge break too, because I was nominated for a Golden Globe for that role, and working with Al and Sean Penn. And I'm so grateful to Al that they gave me another shot. But so much is so hard about auditioning is a lot of times you don't get to audition with the actual actor. And to me, when you're reading with a casting director who's not an actor, and they're usually really bad actors. I mean, forget about Robert De Niro not looking at me. They're like, so what do you think of the, policeman staring at you with a gun or whatever? I mean, literally, like, that's how they're reading it. And you're like, and you're supposed to be reacting, because, to me, a lot of acting is reacting, and they're giving you nothing. I mean, they're like bad. And you're having to like overcompensate and go, okay, I have to imagine a really good actor is reading these lines and imagine it. So to me, it makes such a difference when you get to read opposite the actual actors. And, luckily, like with Matthew Broderick, even with Danny DeVito and Other People's Money, once I got to read with the actor, it changed everything.
Sure.
So now a lot of times I don't have to audition, which is even better. But it definitely makes a difference when you get to... But Gregory Peck was, to go back to your original question, I apologize for my tangent, but Gregory Peck is probably the epitome of a gentleman. I mean, if you were to say a definition of what is a gentleman, Gregory Peck. I mean, graceful, so much dignity, such integrity, just, a wonderful, he was warm, he was, he's so handsome and statuesque, and he has that incredible voice, and he was just, a wonderful, wonderful human being, and a great actor. And To Kill a Mockingbird's one of my favorite movies. And there's actually a funny story where much, much later after I'd done the movie, I did this movie in Europe that William Goldman wrote that Peter Yates directed. Right. And nobody saw, well, maybe some of you may have seen it, I don't know, but it was called Year of the Comet with Tim Daly and Louis Jourdan. And Louis Jourdan played this sort of crazy French bad guy. And I don't know if you know Louis Jourdan from Gigi days, but, he was older, and he too would have his lines written throughout the set because he couldn't remember his lines. And I remember one time we were doing a scene opposite him, and we had the most amazing, we shot in Nice, and we shot in London, and we shot in Scotland. And anyway, there was one scene with opposite Louis Jourdan, and he said, you, please, you're in my way. Get out of the scene. And it was Tim Daly, and he goes, but I'm in the scene with you. And he's like, oh, because he couldn't read his lines because they were next to the camera. So we were standing in the way of his lines, even though we were in the scene with him. And then he's like, could you wear the scene then on your chest? And so anyway, it was really funny. But anyways, cut to several years later, I see Louis Jourdan and Gregory Peck with their wives sitting at a dinner table in a restaurant. So I think, oh, well, I'll go up and say hello. Go up to the table. And I said, hi, it's Penolpe. And, Gregory Peck looks up and Louis Jourdain looks up and Louis Jourdain looks at me and he goes, get away, you go away. And I'm thinking to myself, what is he doing? I said, it's Penolpe. I work, he wouldn't even let me talk. He was like, get away, you go away. And I think he thought I was some fan who was approaching them and wanting maybe their autograph or to say hello or whatever. And he was literally shooing me away from the table. And I'll never forget it. And I could hear his wife in French going, and he was trying to explain to him that I'd worked with him in a movie, but he did not have any recollection of who I was at all. And it was really incredibly humiliating. But I'll never forget it. Gregory,
you should have had
I should have had a sign saying
I worked with you.
I worked with you on a movie.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was one of those really humiliating, embarrassing moments. And I'll never forget it, but Gregory Peck literally stood up, gave me this big hug, and he's like, Penolpe, it's so nice to see you again. And he literally blocked himself from Louis Jourdain to just talk to me. And he said, how are you? And how are your children? And, I'd had my one daughter at the time. But he really took the time to talk to me and make me feel comfortable because it was really, my face was turning bright red. It was so embarrassing.
I was hoping that story was going to have a happy ending.
Well, except
walk away in disgrace from Louis Jourdain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. It was bizarre. Is he still alive? I don't know. But anyway.
I think he became the spokesman for FTD florists. So, enough said.
He might have been on medication. I don't know.
That could have been. Or off medication.
Or off. Yeah, that's even better yet. Yeah. Oh, there go our friends. Bye, y'all. Thank you. Thank you. Enjoy your film. Thanks for coming. That doesn't mean you guys need to leave, but you can if you want. I'll try not to be offended.
One of my favorite modern actors, and I'm so glad he's had a second career, really, is Robert Downey Jr.
I know.
And I know that you worked with him in Chaplin. With Dickie Attenborough as the director.
Sir Richard Attenborough directed Chaplin. And Robert, do you guys have questions? Robert Downey Jr. played Charlie Chaplin, and he was nominated for an Academy Award, and I think he was brilliant. I mean, what a hard role to pull off, Charlie Chaplin. And not only was he reenacting actual scenes that Charlie Chaplin was in, which I got to do, so that was a bit of my silent film acting training, because now I'm a veteran since I did The Artist, so I'm your go-to girl if you're making a silent film, by the way. But he was wonderful, and I played Edna Purviance, who is an actress that did a lot of the Chaplin movies, and yeah, I mean, right after he was nominated, Robert Downey, I mean, I think that was sort of his demise into drugs, and it's just so great to see somebody really get their life back and be as successful as he is, because he's so talented, and he's also a really, really nice guy, and he's really smart. So
when you act, I mean, like in The Artist, for instance, but I guess maybe also in Chaplin, I mean, actors in silent films still had to learn lines, right? Because you can read their lips and they're speaking dialogue.
Well, that's the thing. A lot of people are saying, oh, this must have been great. You guys didn't have to speak, or you didn't have to. I'm like, but we were speaking. We actually could hear each other when we were filming, It's just that we weren't recording our voices. We didn't have an enormous amount of dialogue, I mean, I must say. And another very daunting task was that because we didn't have a lot of dialogue, we did have to ad-lib. And we're not only ad-libbing, we're playing 1920s characters in a silent film. So you also had to be true and authentic to that period, and the way people spoke was very different in the 20s, and the way they related to each other and their mannerisms and everything. And then it's a silent movie, so that gestures and mannerisms and expressions are crucial because the movie's being told visually. So that was definitely a very challenging and daunting task, was to have to improvise some of those moments. But luckily, all my scenes were with Jean Dujardin, and then the dog, Uggy, who is, people love that dog. And then because our characters didn't really talk much, because we were in, a very tense-filled marriage at that point, it kind of it kind of worked out. But yeah, I mean, it's it's interesting because you're really shooting it like you would any other movie. I mean, we had a relationship. There was a story. I mean, it was interesting. Like when it was nominated for Best Writing, Best Screenplay, a lot of people. There was an interviewer who said to me, "Well, was kind of joking and said." Best screenplay, there's no dialogue. And it's like, yeah, there's something called a story. I mean, the movie wouldn't work if there was no story. Like, a screenplay isn't about dialogue, it's about a good story. And if the story wasn't interesting, the movie would have been really boring and people would have walked out. And so to me, actually, I think it must be even more challenging in a way to write a story without a lot of dialogue and have it be silently told, I just think that's a huge feat. So I think it was well deserved.
Yeah, I mean, most producers say they can always tell if a script comes in, if it's no good, if it's all dialogue. Yeah. I mean, it's like explaining everything,
Yeah, yeah. And some of the dialogue can be really bad. So, it's... I'm sure that must have been, really hard to kind of pull off, to think, okay, if I want to make a silent movie, how are we going to tell this story and get the audiences to get caught up in it? But, I mean, you really do forget after 5 minutes that you're watching a silent film when you see that movie. And, I mean, a lot of credit goes to Jean Dujardin, I think, who carried that film. I mean, I just thought he was tremendous, and he takes you on such a ride, with his character. But everyone, Berenice Bejoux and all, James Cromwell and John Good. I mean, everybody was wonderful. And but that Michel Hazanavicius, which took me about a year to pronounce his name.
I pronounce it Havanagila.
That's good. I'll remember that one. Hazanavicius. He's a genius. I mean, it'll be very interesting to see what he does next. But he did these like James Bond spoof movies.
I saw them with
Jean Dujardin, and here he's making this Academy Award-winning film, and deservedly so. It won. I just think what he pulled off, I don't think many people could have pulled off. And he talk about a visionary. I mean, that man knew exactly what he wanted and exactly what he was doing. And every frame, I mean, everything had to be working on all cylinders, from the lighting to the cinematography to the set design to the costumes to everything had to work, the music, everything. Because you rely sometimes too much on the dialogue. I mean, people can text now and know what's going on in a movie. Whereas you have to watch the movie. You have to watch the movie, and you have to silently watch the movie, because otherwise, it's like you're going to miss something. And to me, I think it's great to bring it back to why we fell in love with movies, and it's sort of all the classics rolled into one.
Yeah, I hope that that film would also encourage people to go back and look at some of the great silent classics on DVD, because there's this tremendous heritage of great movies.
Yeah, I mean, and he really doesn't deny, Michel doesn't deny that he even says, I stole from the classics. But we all do. We all steal something from great artists. I mean, we all are inspired, let's say. You could call it stealing, but you can call it just being inspired. I mean, it still was a unique work of art, what he did, but, he took moments from Citizen Kane, there's the scene between Jean Dujardin and I in the breakfast table, which was the Citizen Kane.
Right. Not a silent film either.
And not a silent film. Singing in the Rain, Sunset Boulevard.
Vertigo.
Well, Vertigo was really the music more than, But yeah, I mean, all of those were, and even, Jean Dujardin said Gene Kelly was an inspiration, and Douglas Fairbanks, and Berenice talks about Joan Crawford in her early years, when she was a hoofer, she was a tap dancer, and she was very wild and carefree, and she watched a lot of her movies, and I was sort of very Mary Astor-esque. So I don't know, we were all inspired by all those old movies, but those are the movies that I fell in love with as a young girl, and why I wanted to be an actress.
Well, Picasso once said, "Stealing from others is okay. Stealing from yourself
It's worse.
is worse. You shouldn't do that."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, you've played a lot of, in addition to Edna Purviance, a lot of roles based on real people. Right, Mary Letourneau.
Mary Kay Letourneau. Oh my goodness, yes. Do you remember her? She's the one who had the affair with her elementary school student. It's
Right.
What? Middle school, 13? He was 13.
Yeah.
She was, gosh. Yeah, that was an amazing experience,
Right.
that movie. And I actually thought it was so well made, because the way he filmed it was fascinating to me, because he talked a lot about her relationship with her father. And I talked to her when she was in prison in solitary confinement, and she was a trip. You know, she sort of had this very childlike voice, and you know, she was really in love with this guy, and she's still married to him, and they have 2 kids together. I mean, it's just kind of bizarre in the fact that they're still together. And
At least they got married, right?
they did. They get married. They had to. I mean, so. But yeah, it's a little scary when you're playing real life characters. I just finished a movie where I play Mary Todd Lincoln in a movie called Saving Lincoln that hasn't come out yet, and that to me was pretty exciting and scary at the same time, because you know, she's such a controversial character, and it was such a great history lesson for me. There was so much I didn't know about her. I mean, she was really, I think, bipolar.
Yeah.
But who wouldn't be depressed, you know, or go through a horrible trauma that she went through? She lost 3 of her 4 sons to horrible deaths, like painful, you know, where they were very, very sick, and at the time they couldn't treat. You know, one had a lung disease and basically suffocated to death, and you know, and I can't imagine having 4 children. Then her one surviving son, her only surviving son, institutionalizes her, sends her to an insane asylum. Her husband's assassinated. She was a Southerner, so people thought she was a traitor, and then they thought she was a spy, and 2 of her brothers were killed in the war on the opposite side, and she was also very much behind her husband's presidency. She was very politically ambitious. She was very, you know, ahead of her time, in that she was very educated. She knew a lot about politics. Her father felt that smart girls would get smart men, and were conversationalists and needed to be able to keep up. And she idolized her father and really wanted her father to give her attention, so that's how she got it. And she was a spendthrift, and she decorated that White House during the Civil War when there wasn't a lot of money, so there was a lot of controversy there. But, you know, had it been Jacqueline Kennedy who did it, and she spent a lot of money on her clothes because she felt she had an image to uphold, you know, as the First Lady. So she was really the First Lady. But at the time, people didn't like it, because then women were seen and not heard, or kept upstairs. And so she was a wild character. I mean, I loved her. So it was really fun for me to play. So that's one of the great things to me about doing what I do, is that I get to explore these really juicy roles, hopefully. And
that's coming out this year, right?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it's going to...
What's the name of the film?
Saving Lincoln.
Saving Lincoln.
Yeah, and they filmed it in a very unique, sort of groundbreaking way. We filmed it all on green screen, which means we filmed in a studio with all green screen, because we in the foreground are going to be in color, and in 3D behind us, the background's all going to be the original vintage photographs from that period in black and white. So it's kind of a new special effect, and it's a cheaper way to make a movie. He's getting volunteers that are at colleges and film school who are doing the post-production on this film, because it's a very, very low-budget film. And so he has all these volunteers taking scenes and actually putting them together, and it's really remarkable. But I saw just a template of the visual effects, and it's incredible looking, really cool. So I'm really excited if that story works and we're good, and you know, it could be a very interesting movie. But you know, I think the hope is it'll do the festival circuit and
Right.
Toronto Telluride, which is what we did with The Artist. If we could have even a smidgen of The Artist's success, we would be in great shape.
Right.
But that was Harvey Weinstein too, who got behind that movie, and we were very lucky.
Yeah, that helps.
That really helps. Harvey Weinstein is knows what he's doing when he's promoting a film, I'll tell you that much. But I've never worked so hard promoting a movie in my life, and I worked 3 days on that movie. So I worked more promoting that movie. I think it was 6 months I promoted that movie.
I always thought if Osama bin Laden had been an Academy member, they would have found him a lot sooner because Harvey would have located his address and given him an Academy screener for whatever movie he was promoting that year. You also played a politician's wife, Donna Hanover,
Yeah.
Rudy Giuliani. That must have been weird because were they? Was this after they had divorced?
Yeah. He was remarried, I think, at the time.
Yeah.
But James Woods played Rudy Giuliani. I think he did a great job.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, and
Did you
here's.
ever get any reviews from Rudy on the film? Or?
I think he liked it. I'm pretty sure because they kind of James Woods, I think, really was a fan of Rudy. So I don't think they wanted
Right.
to vilify him.
Right.
You know, when you're playing a real character that's alive, that's scarier because, you know, with Mary Todd Lincoln, she can't say, well, I wasn't like that at all, you know. But, you know, with Mary Kay Letourneau, and hopefully they feel that I did them justice. You know, I don't know if Donna Hanover would have watched the movie, and if she had, I hope she thinks I did okay by her.
Right. But she's an actress herself.
I guess now, sort of, yeah. So it's yeah, it's a little scary because you don't want people to think, you know, that
Right.
you're, you know, not doing a good job playing. I mean, I think it would be weird if someone were to play me. I would be kind of like, you know, who would I get? You know.
Right. Who would you get?
Oh gosh. I never even thought of it,
Okay.
so I can't even. I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, there's people that I've been mistaken for that maybe would be good, but it was funny. I was on the red carpet at the SAG Awards, and they kept saying, you know, you're in these two sort of historical movies. You're in J. Edgar and The Artist, and I'm thinking, J. Edgar, who do they think I am? And I guess they thought I was Naomi Watts. So I've been mistaken for her a couple of times. So maybe she could do a good job. I don't know what kind of an interesting story that would be, to be honest with you. I don't know that they'll be doing a story of my life. But you know, I have to say, it was, you know, they say be careful what you wish for, because I always wanted to do one of those corset dramas. And when we were filming Mary Todd, you know, the Saving Lincoln movie, we were shooting, because it was low budget, the air conditioning just kept not working. And I was sweltering. I mean, it was probably like we were having a heat wave in LA, and it was downtown LA in this like warehouse, and there was more layers on those clothing. And I have to say, I still love, like, I would love to be in that miniseries Downton Abbey. I would love that. Like, those are the kinds of shows that I love to watch. So if they said, could you want to be in it, I would go. But I have to say that it gave me such an enormous amount of respect for these women in history who literally, like, you can't even imagine that they would wear these clothes because they were living in Washington, D.C. and the South and all these places where it's, you know, you guys know from being from Florida, I mean, humid. And I've never seen, I mean, they're like you're wearing drapes and bedspreads. I mean, heavy clothes with layers and layers, and almost like the wealthier you were, the more status you had, the more layers they put on you, and to the point where you couldn't dress yourself because that would show your status, that you had to have a dresser put, you know, every hook and eye and button and everything. But then going to the bathroom, you had outhouses, and you had to have like literally a servant go with you, you know, into the outhouse to help you just get some of your, I mean, I had to have someone come into my trailer literally and like lift my skirt up. I'm not kidding you. It was really embarrassing. But I do have to say, I really love period pieces. I really do. I would also love to be on like Mad Men, you know, which is early 60s.
You'd be great in
but
Mad Men.
thank you. I tell the writer, right? What's his name? Jason
Weiner?
Matt Weiner.
Matt Weiner.
Yeah. Okay. You can tell him, Peter. Will you?
I know his
Penolpe.
sister very well.
Okay, well, tell his sister to tell him. But if I were to do television, because I haven't done a lot of television, that would be a fun one to be on.
But if you do these corset roles, then how are your ribs these days?
I know. Well, so far I haven't fractured any more ribs from the
Right.
corsets, but I was like sweating beyond because I had a wig in the movie. I mean, obviously I looked nothing like Mary Todd Lincoln. So I wanted to make myself look bigger, and so of course I'm adding volume to myself and trying to make my cheeks look bigger. And it's funny because Steven Spielberg's doing a movie about Lincoln, and Daniel Day-Lewis
Right.
is playing but Sally Field, who's like, what, 20 years older than, or 15, I shouldn't age her more than she is, I don't know, maybe 10 years older. But she's playing Mary Todd Lincoln. Because when you look at Mary Todd Lincoln in her early days, she was really quite attractive. Most people think she wasn't, but...
Well, a lot of the pictures that I remember, at least of her,
older.
she looks very, dour and sort of grave looking.
Well, probably by the time they were taking pictures of her, a lot had happened to her in her life. I think in her youthful days,
Yeah.
where they probably weren't photographing her that much, she was still
Great, yeah.
spry and happy. But most of those pictures, those old-fashioned pictures, because they sort of blast you. They always said you had to sit still for like a couple minutes,
Yeah.
right?
I think
Because
you weren't supposed to smile either.
you weren't supposed to smile.
Yeah.
Yes, that's why everyone looks sort of depressed and dour in those days. But I'm sure there were some happy folk out there.
There's also another Lincoln movie, like a Lincoln
There's
vampire.
there's a whole Lincoln
Yeah.
trend going on. So I think the vampire one already came out. Hopefully ours will come out before Spielberg's, because Spielberg's will be like the $100 million version, the epic,
Right.
where they actually got to film in the location that they were in real life. But so me and Sally Field will be duking it out as
There you
Mary
go.
Todd. It was really funny because they were showing yesterday at the luncheon, and I feel bad because I didn't thank Thelma Adams for such a lovely introduction. And but they did a retrospective of some of my film work, and and it's actually with Pee Wee Herman and Big Top Pee Wee, where we've broken up, and he comes to sort of make amends with me, or to make sure, truce, and I hope you're okay, Winnie, because now I joined the circus. And then I said, my line is, oh, I'm doing great. I've never felt so alive, so free, so sure of myself, so beautiful. And he's like, okay, I get the point. Because he's saying, I hope you're okay since we broke up. And
Right.
so I like that line.
And that was
I've never felt so beautiful and free since you left me. He's like, yeah, I get the point, Winnie. So that
was
was
some
fun.
of that filmed here? Big
No,
Top?
we filmed it at Paramount, and we filmed actually pretty much the whole movie at the Disney Ranch, which is out in Valencia near Magic Mountain in Los Angeles, and that was really beautiful because they have an incredible ranch out there.
Yeah.
So, but there were people. Benicio del Toro played the dog-face boy in that movie,
Right.
and Valeria Golina, who then did, is it Rain Man?
Yeah.
Yeah, after our movie, and
Yeah.
so it was, and Chris Christopherson was in it, and it was fun. That was a fun movie.
Christopherson must have been a character, I would think.
Yeah, well, he's like Chris Christopherson, like
Yeah.
Christopher Walken is like Christopher Walken. You sort of.
Right.
But I remember the movie *Star Is Born* with Barbra Streisand, and I loved that movie. So.
I have to say, I hope it's okay to say, but one of the first interviews I ever did professionally when I was out of college was with Christopherson.
Oh, really?
During *Star Is Born*, and I met his manager at this Polynesian restaurant on the Coast Highway in Malibu, and Christopherson hadn't arrived at the restaurant yet. So the manager says to me, he says, Chris kind of likes it if the people who are doing the interviewing are kind of a little high before all kind of get high. So he
Wow.
went back on the beach, got a little high, and then he showed up pre-high, and we ate about 4 tubs of ribs at this restaurant.
Wow.
And he told me all about working on *A Star Is Born*. He carried a volume of Whitman in his back pocket. It was everything I expected and more.
Right. So it was method interviewing.
Method, yeah. Right, I should have saved that tape.
So I would love to go back and do theater. Funnily enough, because I started in theater, I'm a little scared of it right now because I haven't done it in so long, and I think, oh my God, 8 shows a week. I mean, it takes a lot of energy. I mean, talk about being physically
Yeah.
healthy and fit, and it's a lot of work to do theater. The thing that's so gratifying about doing theater is that you get the immediate reaction. The audience is laughing, crying. You really get to live out the story from beginning to end. You take the journey every night, and you get to learn something every night, and you get to sort of play with it and discover. The thing about filmmaking is it's all chopped up, and it's not done in sequence, and so you have to think, where's my character at this point? Like I said in Carlito's Way, I filmed the end first, and had to have been all in love with this man and be devastated at his death, and then you don't know which take they're going to use, whereas you have control of what the audience is seeing every night. So there's a lot that's really rewarding about doing theater, and you learn a lot because you really know, you can tell when the audience is with you and when they're not with you, and they're not laughing, and they're not, so it really helps you kind of understand organically, instinctively, what works. So it's exciting, and then you get the applause at the end, and but it's hard because you're repeating it over and over and over again, and so I think it can take a lot out of you. But there's something cool about doing film too, and then seeing the end product. Like with The Artist, I was so surprised when I saw the movie. Because there was all these scenes I wasn't in that I was like, wow, that's beautiful. Oh my God, that's so cool. So that was fun because you don't really get to see what you're doing on stage, except for in my case, I got to film Biloxi Blues in our town. So, but they both have their rewards.
When you do theater, though, I would think if you're doing comedy, then there's an immediate response, right? I mean, if you say something that's supposed to be funny in a Neil Simon play, then if you don't get the laugh, that can be a problem.
Yeah.
But if you're doing a serious scene, you don't necessarily know if it's working unless you're hearing people sniffling all over the place or throwing up.
Yeah,
but,
you're laughing when you're supposed to be crying.
So I think, but when you're doing a film, whether it's funny or serious, I mean, the grips aren't like crying or laughing,
can't.
so it's sort
the
of
good
like
thing about filming a movie that's not, the sound isn't recording, is that the grips and the electricians and the light could laugh. Luckily, unfortunately with Jean and our characters, it was all so tragic and depressing. But Jean's a real cut up. I mean, he loves to ham it up. So he was constantly, you could tell because some of the crew was French and some of them were English. We filmed it all in Hollywood, but they did hire some French people, and he doesn't speak very much English. So he kept making jokes, and like half the crew would be laughing and half would be like completely like, I don't know what you're saying, but I guess it's funny. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the beauty about having theater training, is that you get to where you can kind of sense it. Because with drama, it's true, you can't really see if they're but you can feel it. You feel the energy. Yeah.
Did Michel talk during the filming of scenes because it was silent?
Not always. He talked a lot between takes, not a lot either.
But not over the acting?
No, I mean, not so. I didn't remember that so much. And he's playing this music, and it was really loud and very, it was just sort of enveloped the whole set. So, yeah, it was one of those things where even my agent who called me about it kind of was making it, he was sort of reluctantly sort of telling me about it, almost apologetically, and saying, well, I've got this movie that I don't know if you'd be interested. It's a silent film, and it's black and white, and it's set in the 1920s, and it's a director named Michel, never heard of, and the two leads are already cast. They're these French actors, never heard of them. It's about Hollywood in the 1920s, filmed all in LA. It was just so bizarre. I said, wait, the whole movie's silent? Like the entire movie's silent? And he's like, the whole movie's being filmed like a silent movie. And I thought, gosh, anybody so brave and bold and courageous to make a movie like this, I have to at least meet on it. So, but he told me that a lot of actors that he approached about the script were either couldn't get through read it and just kind of, because really when you're reading a script like that, it's like reading a short story. I mean, it's very descriptive. The scenes are very, this is about what's going on in the relationship. So it's like you're reading a book. You know how like when you read a book, there's some dialogue in the book, where people are quoted, but most of the book is obviously descriptive in what the characters are thinking and feeling, which is actually really kind of great. So, so, I read it and it was just fascinating to me. The whole notion of it was fascinating. But because I'm very nostalgic about old Hollywood, I've watched old movies. I watched black and white. I watched a lot of silent film because I did the movie Chaplin. And, for me, it was kind of more like I'm doing, this will be just sort of a kick in the pants. Like, I'm going to go and make this movie and just pretend that I live in the 20s and I live in a mansion and I have beautiful silk satin lace clothes and china and I'll work about 3 or 4 days or whatever and I'll just have a good time. When I met the director, Michel, I was very intrigued by him because he really had done a lot of his homework. And a lot of the people that he hired behind the scenes, as they call below the line, the cinematographer, a lot of them were either, Academy Award nominated type of people, or they were, very, very reputable in their field. So I was really impressed that he was getting people to do the movie that were already sort of at the top of their game. And then John Goodman's name had been talked about to play the mogul, the man who ran the studio, and then James Cromwell as the chauffeur. And so I thought, well, they're getting kind of good people, and but really, it wasn't really until I came on the set. And the great thing about that was that, it was beautifully designed and decorated. And when we were shooting the scenes, he played music on the set. So because we didn't have to record the sound, we could actually, like you do as an audience when you're watching the scenes, you get moved by the music. Like the music has an effect on the mood of the scene, whether it's a happy scene or a dramatic or tragic. And so he did that, and he played.
What music was it?
Well, he actually, that's the reason that he used, one of them he wrote,
right,
that ended up in the movie, was just like a quick thing he wrote. He did use Vertigo, which is why he ended up fighting for it to be in the movie, was
right,
because he fell in love with that score so much that he really wanted to use it in the movie. But, he just found great classical pieces, and but it really created a mood, not only for us as actors performing, but also for the crew. The crew got all caught up in it. So it really created an incredible environment. So I had a feeling we were doing something. And the hair, I was 2.5, once again, be careful what you wish for, because 2.5 hours in hair and makeup, getting my hair to be crimped a certain way, and the makeup, and sitting under a hair dryer because my hair had to be pin curled, and get my manicure. It's exhausting. But I had a feeling we were doing something special. But there's really no way in a million years we could have ever predicted that we would have gotten, not only just, there's the reviews, the festivals, the accolades, the awards, and then winning the 5 Academy Awards. It was really unheard of, and it's just one of those remarkable things. It's like, you do these films thinking nobody's going to go see it, or is anybody going to go see it? And how do you act in a silent film? And will we pull it off? Are we going to make fools out of ourselves? And is anyone going to, care? And then for it to have turned out better than our wildest dream. The movie turned out so much better than I ever could imagine. It was just, the more I see it, the better it gets. Because there's so many nuances in the film that are so incredible, and subtle moments and comical moments and wry and clever. So, it just all paid off. But you never know. It's always the ones you least expect, probably. Well, as usual, they say don't act with children or animals because they'll upstage you. And sure enough, Uggy, I think, upstaged all of us. But it's like, what would the Wizard of Oz be without Toto? He was such an important character to the story. He was, like they say, man's best friend. He was his best friend, and he was a great little dog. If you call it acting. It's so funny because it's like, it was all about, as Michelle likes to say, it was all about the sausages, the treats, whether the dog would be getting treaties. And so Jean Dujardin, had treats in his pockets, treats in his socks, and so of course the dog would be constantly walking next to him. But there was a scene where I actually have to throw the newspaper at him because I'm so frustrated that my husband won't speak to me, and of course the dog's there, and he's giving more attention to the dog than he is me. So I'm very, very jealous, and he wanted me to throw the newspaper and hit the dog in the face, which is kind of scary thing to do to a little animal, but luckily paper's lightweight. But because it was so lightweight, it kept flying off. Like I had it rolled up, and then I'm supposed to grab it and throw it, but it just kept like drifting off, and it kept not hitting the dog. And it was really funny because our director Michelle was like, typical woman, she can't hit a target. And so he said, okay, let me show you. And so he actually said, film it. And, they won't show his hand. And he said, no, I'll show you how it's done. And it was, he grabs the newspaper and he throws it. And of course, it flies off in the wind. The whole crew cracks up because, clearly I got to make my point by, this isn't that easy to do. And then finally, after take, I finally hit my target. And I hit this dog, and the dog looks up at me, and I'll never forget it. And Jean Dujardin looks down and he looks up at me like, "How dare you?" And it was just mortifying. And literally, my reaction is the reaction in the film where I literally cut my hand to my face, like, "Oh my God, I hit this dog." And then the animal activists all showed up. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, no, he was fine after that. We gave him a sausage. So.
Well, and he had studied with Herbert Berghoff.
He studied with her Uda too, which I for some reason didn't study with. But yeah.
But I understand he's retired.
I've heard he's retiring. Well, he has an ailment where you can see his leg shakes or something. He's old. It's like
really.
Yeah, I think he's how old is he, Eloisa? Like the dog. Do you remember? I thought he's like 16 or something, or he's
which
not.
Is like 80.
Which is like 80.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah. But then I heard he was doing something. So I don't know. It's they pulled me back in. You think his last swan song, and now he's being pulled back into the.
Because they took him everywhere. I know when the LA.
He was at the Academy Awards.
He was at the Academy Awards. He was at the Golden Globes. He was also. I'm a member of the Los Angeles Film Critics Association. The film won some awards there, so they brought him as a not-so-secret surprise to the award show at the end to do a little thing. The poor dog was just... Yeah.
Even on the red carpet, he would upstage us. It was unbelievable. And he won the Golden Collar Award. They have this new awards show for dogs, and it's called the Golden Collar, and he won.
Yeah, I think Scorsese was not happy that the dog,
the dog
Hugo, was not even nominated, I think. Yeah.
I know. Isn't that funny? I think he took an ad out in the trade saying, why was his dog overlooked for Best Actor? And I said, well, maybe they should have a Best Supporting Dog role, and maybe he would have had a chance.
Next year.
Next year. It was so funny. I was doing CNN, that Showbiz Today, and they asked me, they said, do you think there should be an Academy Award for dogs or for animals? And, of course, he's joking around with me. I can't imagine they would really do this. But I said, of course they should be. Like they did the little one for Shirley Temple, when she won, didn't she get like a little miniature Academy Award? And then they asked the actor, Ralph Fiennes, who was being interviewed after me, And so I was like, oh, of course they should. They should have, an award for the dog. And then they asked Ralph Fiennes after me, and he was like, oh, no, they shouldn't do that. And he took it very seriously. And I was like, oh, Ralph, lighten up. So, anyway.
Well, how do you feel about motion, about like Andy Serkis and these actors who are making, big careers? He played in Lord of the Rings, Gollum, right? Actors who they act, but then it's all digitized and computer generated. You know what I'm talking about?
He was the actor in the Planet of the Apes. Thanks.
Right, and every year there's always a push, usually because he's involved, but there are other very good actors, who say there should be an acting category for that, or they should be considered with the,
like a special effect type of acting.
Well, because it's hard to know if you're playing Gollum in Lord of the Rings. On the one hand, it's a marvelous performance, but so much of it is digitized, created, in the computer. Would you take a role like that if you felt it had something, involved? Or
I guess so. It's like, you think about, It's funny how our movie, The Artist, is sort of the opposite of that, you know, because it's really all
it's
about
out there. Yeah.
what we're. It's literally this, like,
Yeah.
this tells the whole story. Like, if this ain't working, like whatever we're doing, you know, if we're not feeling it, you're not feeling it.
Yeah.
Which to me is, I think that's why Jean won, and I think because actors who make up a large part of the Academy, I mean, realize that it's really, really a lot of pressure to kind of, you know, emote and not hear what we're saying or hear the inflection in our voices and everything. But then when it's all happening in a digital sort of technical way, I mean, talk about not having control, because, you know, we do have the control when we're expressing ourselves, you know. I sort of made a joke. I was like, I guess I can't get Botox or anything, because then you won't see my expressions, you know, especially in The Artist. So, but
I heard there was there was a problem in Beverly Hills, that there were a lot of children who were very maladapted, and because the mothers had so much Botox that they couldn't have frown expressions.
So they don't know when they're mad at them.
Yeah, you can't really show you're mad because you're all kind of Botoxed up, and so there's this a lot of very misbehaved.
And then I hear a lot of young actors are starting to do Botox really early so that they don't develop the lines, which is so crazy to me. It's just becoming...
That is pretty crazy.
Yeah. You know, it's sort of proactive Botoxing. I think we're digressing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think everyone's like, okay, I think it's time to go now.
Right. We could go on. I'm sure it's edging close to 3 o'clock.
Oh my God!
Any?
I really appreciate you guys sitting around for this. Of course, it's raining, so you can't go to the beach. So might as well sit and listen to me.
You might as well take shelter from the storm with us. There you go.
Yeah, it sounds like it's pouring out there, so get ready. But unless anyone has any more questions, I don't want to keep you from your afternoon.
Yeah, I guess we'll call it a wrap. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for
guys
showing
so
up.
much. Thanks for coming.